Welcome to Under the Radar, a show about independent iOS app development. I'm Marco Arment.
And I'm David Smith. Under the Radar is never longer than 30 minutes, so let's get started. So, I have a problem, and I think it's a problem that I think you can probably help me with, Marco, and I think it's something that we need to talk about.
Are you breaking up with me?
No, nothing like that.
Good.
But it's an area that I hear that you're an expert in, and I feel like I just need some advice. So, this last week, I've been, dealing with kind of a tricky situation, programmatically. So I'm working on Workouts++. I have, been adding a whole bunch of new features to it. It's been this really nice, update that I've planned for the end of this year. And there's one thing left, basically. I have this one big task I need to undertake. I need to redesign the workout configuration screen. And it's kind of this big multi-day task that I'm kind of honestly scared about. And the thing that I'm struggling with is what is the best methods that I can use to procrastinate and not do it? Because that is essentially what I have found myself doing for the last week. And in all honesty, I thought it would be an interesting thing to discuss because I started to keep track of what things I should, what all the strategies that I have come up with to avoid doing this task. And so far my list is 19 different things that I have done in the last week to avoid doing this. And so, there's just a little bit of comedy in that. And, I'm sure you have your own, and I think it actually is interesting to unpack a little bit of what the things that I do, are, because the more I think about this and as I'm slightly self-aware, the thing that is most likely to get me to actually, attack this problem and to solve it is to recognize when I'm doing the things that are avoidance and when I'm, and recognize them for what they are. And, maybe sometimes that's okay. But the reality is when I do some of these things, the first one on my list is implementing random new small features.
Yep, I do that.
I've just been doing that random and which in some ways is great. I've added some really cool, interesting ideas to Workouts++, but at the same time, I was why am I adding these random features that are not core to the core experience of the app when all I'm really doing is just putting off this thing that is absolutely essential that I cannot ship this update without doing. So anyway, I hear you're an expert in avoiding work, so you seem the right person to talk to about this problem I'm having.
Oh yeah, it's like Procrastiworking. It's there's something that you really don't want to do, and so instead of doing that, you do other things that make you feel productive, that maybe are productive, but are still not the thing you're really supposed to be doing, or the one big thing that you have to do. It's not that thing, but you're doing other things that nevertheless are either useful or valuable or productive in some other way. So this happens to me all the time. It is really hard for me to motivate myself to work on something I don't feel like doing. This was always a problem in my entire schooling when I was a kid, and doing any ever motivating myself to do homework or anything. It was just impossible for me. It was there was a brick wall. This is probably just my lack of work ethic or being lazy or something like that. I don't think there's any kind of clinical explanation for this, but basically just making it impossible for me to do things I don't feel like doing or that I'm discouraged from doing or that I don't want to do. So I've always suffered from that or had problems with that. I have never found ways to manage it. And I probably never will find ways to manage it. If I hadn't even started by the time I'm now 35 and I still haven't figured out how to do things that I want to do, I'm probably this probably is not the kind of thing I'm going to get better at over time. I just have to figure out ways to manage it and work around it. I too am facing large barriers. For me, it's almost debilitating for Overcast development right now because I'm very susceptible to convincing myself that a crazy UI hack is worth doing because it makes the app nicer or it achieves something I want to achieve in the UI. And so over time, in all of my apps, I have always, even though I've told you and the listeners on this show, just stick with stock UI kit stuff. Don't hack it. Don't do crazy stuff. Don't do crazy custom stuff if you don't have to. You're better off sticking with customs or sticking with stock stuff. The reason I say that is because I keep not following that advice myself, and I keep doing crazy UI stuff that takes massive amounts of development time, creates huge numbers of weird little bugs and animation bugs and everything else that I then have to spend more development time on. And then if Apple changes some critical thing, or I want to adopt some new kind of style, like moving from a collection view or from a table view to a collection view, or something like that. Like if I wanted to do something fancy or something new, or in the case of iOS 11, things like adopting drag and drop for reordering, that then requires me to throw out my giant pile of hacks that I did before and possibly create a new one. And so my iOS 11 update has been plagued with massive amounts of messing with the UI. First of all, iOS 11 basically seems to have rewritten UI table view. Like the way UI table view works in iOS 11 is so different, especially in the ways it manages sizing and animations. Basically, it broke all my table views in some way or another, and it broke all of my custom cells, and it broke everything about how I do it. And the only reason Overcast runs on iOS 11 at all right now, in the public version, is that when it's built against a previous SDK, like the iOS 10 SDK, it runs in a compatibility mode. And Apple seems to be using mostly the old UI table view code for apps that are built against it, which is nice. But I can't just keep building my app against the iOS 10 SDK forever. So I can't use iOS 11 features without building against the iOS 11 SDK. So I have to basically, in the process of adopting some pretty basic iOS 11 stuff, I've had to rewrite many of my core table view logic and cells and views and everything else. And turns out podcast apps have a lot of those. So it has been a massive undertaking, and it's incredibly demoralizing because all I want to do is work on like features. Like that's all I want to do. I have so many great ideas for cool features I want to do, and I'm stuck working for months on end, months and months and months on animation glitches and minor UI stuff that all I'm doing is trying to restore it from where it was before to the new iOS 11 version, and it is horrible. So instead of doing that, or rather in addition to doing that, really, I have also taken lots of time here to do other things. So I've been, modifying the UI to accommodate things people actually want, like the one tap play thing. I didn't have to do that in this update, but I kind of shoved it in because I needed a break from doing all the incredibly tedious and demoralizing table view hacking. So I did that. I've debated and tweaked and even shared on Twitter the process of doing lots of different UI details. I have also added, a couple new settings and fixed that long-standing copy in the search box crashing bug. Thanks to Brent Simmons for that. And so there have been so many things that I've done in the meantime. I have set up a whole new laptop. Currently I'm recording on a laptop because I finally brought in my iMac for repair because the warranty expires in 9 days, and I figured I might as well get it repaired. So that's a whole ordeal to prepare an iMac, to prepare your main computer to go into Apple for a week, then prepare another computer to be your main computer in the meantime. I'm getting my dog a haircut this afternoon. My kitchen has never been cleaner than it has been these last few weeks because it's like anytime there's a speck of anything in the kitchen or anything is out, I clean it immediately because that's something to do that feels productive. We've we've played a lot of Stardew Valley in our house in the last few weeks. That for some reason feels productive because it's a game that feels like work. So it is crazy how much I have done in the app in the last few months, really, and in the last few weeks, solely to keep myself sane while I have either been procrastinating or been slogging through working on these horrible UI things that I honestly just do not want to work on, and I just cannot wait for it to be done and shipped. Not to mention the iPhone 10 and adopting to that, all the all the insets and everything. It turns out that while Apple has made a pretty good system with the safe area insets and safe area guides and everything, the API is actually pretty complete and pretty rich for that, and I'm really happy working with it when I do. But if your app supports landscape orientation at all, you probably have to work on every single screen in the app to adopt to the iPhone 10. Any screen that supports landscape on an iPhone probably needs work. Not to mention, every screen, in portrait orientation needs at least consideration. if you have anything beyond a very basic navigation bar and toolbar stock setup, anything else where you put anything anywhere near an edge or the top or the bottom or a corner. And by the way, for the past decade, stock iOS design has meant putting things in corners. Now we have no corners. So that's a challenge. So like there is so much like tedious, demoralizing work that I've had to do just to catch up to iOS 11 and the iPhone 10 that I'm just starving for ways to procrastinate and other things to do that can kind of give me the little happy boost of having accomplished something beyond just slogging away at another safe area insets thing or another UI table view animation bug.
Well, that's somewhere that I can help you, because I have a long list of other approaches that you haven't mentioned so far to avoid work. So like there's organizing your to-do list, which is great. And then
oh yeah, I did that last night. I merged all the beta feedback from multiple sources into one document that I'm now working off of.
And then the best part, once you've done that, right, is then you start to question your to-do list method in the first place.
Oh yeah.
And if you're using the right app for it, you want to explore, try out a few other apps, or try, think about, what if there's a different method or approach? So I did that. I've done that for a while. I've gone through all my emails I was supposed to respond to for several weeks that have been backing up in my inbox. I watched a few WWDC videos that I've been meaning to for a while, which is great. It feels so productive to be in there. Like there's code. I feel like I'm learning. I went field testing, so like I have a workout app, right? So like I can go for a walk.
Yeah, field testing for you means I went for a walk.
It's great, right?
Or
like
I
it's
fell
so
asleep.
productive.
It was a sleep tracker too. It's like, I took a nap to test I have to test this app.
I mean, perfect, right? Like that's exactly this is the right mindset. We're on the same wavelength here.
Mm-hmm.
I've been solving other people's problems. Like anytime, so you have anytime you mention any kind of design issue with Overcast, I'm like right there. Like let me get in there. Let me solve other people's problems because their problems are better than mine.
Hey, your feedback has been awesome. Very detailed.
Yeah, I got lots of time. I got lots of attention for it. This may not surprise you. I've prototyped at least one or maybe two apps.
Of course. Why not? That's just a typical Tuesday, right?
just like, hey, I have this idea. Why don't I try it out? Hey, great. There goes half a day. I decide, what I need to do to build this feature? Like, I'm just scared of it because I don't know what it's going to look like. I haven't designed it yet. So, I usually just design in code, but maybe what I should do is I should design in paper. And then I need to explore different ways of, designing in paper and like finding the right grid and the right dot grid that I need to within that.
I mean, you have to buy a new notebook, maybe some drafting pens.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about buying a notebook, but the problem is the shipping, and it doesn't feel productive if you have to wait on shipping. It's much more productive if I can just spend a while going through PDFs of like printable guides and deciding which one is exactly right, rather than just buying the Pano book, the new book that the Studio Unique guys came out with, and then I'd be done. Like that would take 5 minutes. No. I need to really research this and make sure I'm doing it the right way. I have the ability. I worked on other apps, which was fun.
Naturally,
like some of my other apps that had been slightly neglected. I was like, oh great! I need to work on them instead. Let's see. I spent a while trying to find just the right music to listen to while I was trying to solve this problem, because clearly that's the problem.
Yeah, that's definitely the problem. And now you have to also research headphones, streaming services. Maybe get into the weird worlds of like ASMR and other weird stuff that you could be listening to instead of music. There's
maybe it would help. Maybe it would help. Maybe that would be. Maybe that's my problem. I'm just listening to the wrong music.
Yeah, you can maybe work on your desk setup. Like if you need to like clean your desk or
that's
rearrange
that's the next
things.
thing on my list. That's number 17. Clean my office.
Yes.
I mean, it is amazing how you can. I mean, I will confess, my office is not really clean, but I have moved stuff around a lot. Like nothing is where it was at the beginning of the week. It's not really clean. It's just moved. It's just different. I've gone upstairs and it's like, what I need? Oh, I need to take a break and like make a cup of coffee, get a snack. Maybe it's like blood sugar issues. Like maybe that's why I can't focus and work on this thing. I need to have a nice snack and maybe get a little caffeine. Maybe that'll solve me. I bought some hardware. Like I got a new hard drive setup for our media at home. Like,
you needed that.
I totally needed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it is amazing how creative you can be when you're trying to avoid doing something. Like all of those things that I just went through, like are things that I did and are like sort of productive, like sort of useful, but in reality, not really so. It's like lots of movement, not moving in the right direction. Like it's so frustrating when I start to like actually like self-reflect about it and like see what I'm doing, because like I feel like in some ways I really appreciated when I worked. It feels like a lifetime ago, but back when I worked in a more traditional programming job where I had a boss who would tell me to do something, even if I didn't want to do it, like I could begrudgingly do it because I kind of had to. I could have, not that I was like perfectly productive in that environment, and there were many times that I still like found things to do to avoid doing it. But there was certainly something powerful in having somebody at the end of the day being like, "So where show me how far you've gotten on this feature." And if I didn't have anything to show, like that would reflect poorly on me, and I'd be embarrassed or like feel like I hadn't been, sort of doing things right, and it would be socially awkward. And I mean, I'll do a lot to avoid being socially awkward, or avoid socially awkward situations. And so I could work on it, and I could get things done in that way. But without somebody who is like I'm accountable to for building something, it is so easy to just come up with a reason to not. And it's like the thing that is so rough. I think you mentioned this. It's like it feels like physically, it's like from a physical perspective, like it actually feels good because you're able to like get the like I think the awkward thing is I probably get just as much like immediate satisfaction from reorganizing my desk as I will in 2 or 3 days when I finally finish this big redesign. And like that's kind of awkward because it's not like it grows proportionally with the difficulty of the task. If it did, like in some ways I'd have this like built-in incentive, like, oh man, once I solve this really big problem, I'll feel really, really good. But the reality is, at least for myself, is like I'll probably feel just as productive and just as a sense of accomplishment. Maybe like I'll feel 10% more than I will for just moving stuff around on my desk, and then not remembering where anything is.
We are sponsored this week by Linode. Linode has fast and powerful hosting options that you can set up in just seconds. Their tools are easy to understand, and they let you choose your resource level and your Linux distro, giving you the power and flexibility that you need. And Linode plans now start at just $5 a month for a Linux server with 1 gig of RAM in the Linode cloud. Whether you're getting started with just your first server or whether you're deploying a complex system, I think I have something like 25 Linodes, something like that. Linode is the right choice for you. Linode offers the fastest hardware and network with fantastic customer support behind it all. It has never been easier to launch a Linode cloud server. And they have lots of great tutorials. If you like, even if you're not using Linode, if you want to know how to do something with Linux system administration, if you just search the web for like, a guide to set up Nginx or something like that, there's a very good chance Linode's support documents are going to show up in that search, and that's going to be what helps you out. They make it so easy. They have great documentation, great customer support if you need it. Linode guarantees 99.9% uptime for server availability, and once your server is up, they keep it that way. Linode's great for tasks like hosting databases, running a mail server, running private Git servers, operating entire powerful applications, and so much more. So check it out today at linode.com/radar. They have fantastic pricing options. You can get a server with 1 gig of RAM for just $5 a month. You can go all the way up to 16 gigs of RAM for just $60 a month. Across the board, this is twice the amount of RAM that you'll get elsewhere. Once again, if you sign up at linode.com/radar, you will support our show and you will get $20 towards any Linode plan. And with a 7-day money-back guarantee, there's nothing to lose. So go to linode.com/radar to learn more, sign up, and take advantage of that $20 credit or use promo code RADAR2017 at checkout. Thank you so much to Linode for supporting the show. So I think one thing you've touched on is there's different value to how you spend your time, and there's value to you, and then there's value to your customers or your users or your apps, and there needs to be a balance of both, really. Like, you mentioned, like, it feels great to clean up your desk and rearrange things or do things in other apps, but like, so that in that way, like, you are like you're kind of paying yourself there. You're doing something to satisfy yourself, but your customers are getting nothing to very little from that. Your customers and your apps also need their needs to be satisfied, and so and your business needs to be satisfied. So ultimately, the correct balance is both. And like in my case, I'm not great at this, but like I have tried to do that myself, where some of the ways I'm procrastinating are adding features to the app that people actually want anyway. I'm not just doing the UI stuff. And also, I'm having to do things like that just to keep myself motivated to keep going at all. Because otherwise, I would just fall into a big rut and just not get anything done for months, which has happened before and will probably happen again. But, like in order to avoid falling into a rut and doing nothing for a while, I have to do things that are interesting to me sometimes. But I can do one of those a week and then try to spend the rest of the week doing what I actually have to do. And I feel like that's a good balance. If I only did things that weren't the big thing I had to do, then that big thing wouldn't get done, and then I would be doing these interesting things that things like, oh, this would be a great time to adopt RX Swift or unit testing or some other thing that Casey likes. And if I did that, that would be nice. That might be interesting. That might be satisfying. That might bring other benefits. But if a major version of my app is being delayed while I mess around with other stuff like that, that's ultimately hurting the app, and that's not going to make that big need go away. You're still going to need to do the big thing. You're still going to need to finally do the thing that you've been putting off. Now you're just doing it later. So there is a balance to be struck, but and you can't. It's like queue starvation or priority starvation. You can't totally ignore the big thing. You have to eventually do it. What do you think are strategies to actually finally just do it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I've been thinking about. And in some ways, this is the thing that I love about having a podcast, right? Because it kind of I started working in earnest on this feature that I've been putting off this morning, a couple hours ago, when I decided that we were going to talk about it on the show. And partly it's not everyone has a podcast that they can talk about and then feel bad if they hadn't actually started. But I think the key thing that I was realizing is, it's the importance of being honest with ourselves, because as much as I would like to say, you can't just will yourself to be more productive or be more motivated. Maybe that works for some people, but it certainly doesn't work for me. And from my experience with most talking to other people, it is the kind of thing that all you can do is put yourself in an environment where you are likely to be motivated. But you cannot directly affect motivation itself. It is somewhat more ephemeral, in that way. And so what you end up with are what are things that you can do to try and make yourself more motivated, or at the very least to short circuit the things that are unmotivating you. And so as an example, something that I honestly have started to do that I think has been very helpful in shortening the amount of time I spend doing, these things that feel productive but aren't actually working towards my fundamental goals, is to be just trying to be more mindful of when I'm doing that. And so it's being aware of it was actually really productive for me to sit down and make this list of 19 things that I've done to avoid working on this feature. Because now that it's a list, it feels less scary, and it feels more it's very this concrete thing, and I can choose to add something to that list, or I can work on the actual feature. And at a certain point, adding another thing to the list feels worse than working on the feature. And so that's a productive thing to just be aware of when you're doing it, and not end up just spending 3 days adding random features to the app, as an avoidance mechanism, and not be aware that you're doing it and why you're doing it. Because it's totally fine to do those things and to be I don't want to work on that today. I'm going to do this other random thing there. But at least then it's a conscious choice. At least it's a thing that I'm choosing to do, rather than letting my subconscious avoid the work, on its own. If I make a choice, then at least that's slightly better. And I think too, the other thing a strategy that I was thinking about when I was trying to think of what's the actual the end advice to give at the end of this episode. And I think, the other thing is to try and understand why you don't want to do it. because it's probably useful to make sure, like, is this actually something that I need to do? Like, am I avoiding it because I don't think it's actually a good feature, or because I don't think it's actually going to be useful, or like I'm doing it for the wrong reason? Like I'm adding this feature because I think it's what all the cool kids are doing, but it's not really, doesn't fit with the style of my app, or something like that, for example. Like if you're adding this feature because you think Apple will love you because you're implementing a new API or something. Like if it's for a reason that's external like that, like make sure that it's you internally actually want to do it. Because if you don't, like sometimes there are certainly things that are externally, foisted on you that you have no choice about. Like you have to file your taxes with the IRS every year. Like otherwise really bad things happen. But not implementing the hot new API, Apple isn't going to come knocking on your door in the same way. So being aware of that and making sure that it is something that you need to do and you actually should do. And if that is the case, then like, what is it about it that makes it scary? Like for me in this case, like what I've kind of come to understand is that what made me scared is that it felt like something that I couldn't wrap my arms around. Like it's this slightly too big problem. And so to get started, like what I did this morning when I actually got started on working on it is I said, okay, I'm not going to worry about like this crazy complexity tree that I'm about to have to go down. I'm just going to worry about the first step. I'm just going to do this thing. I'm going to get that going. And then that was a lot less scary. And then from here, I'll implement the next screen and I'll implement the next screen. And in the back of my mind, like there's that little part of me that says, Dave, there's probably going to be like 20, 30 screens you're going to have to implement to make this work. Like, isn't that crazy and scary? And that's just like consciously saying to myself, it's like, it's okay. I'm just going to worry about this one right now. I know. And that made it a little bit better for me. It made me it's a little bit silly that I'm a grown man, but I have to like, coach myself through doing my job, but that's where I am. And so like, whatever, that's who I am. And I found that it works. To break it down into something that's slightly less scary when I was able to realize that the thing that made it scary was how big it was.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it because, I think one of the biggest challenges of indie work is that, as you mentioned earlier, like the boss effect goes away mostly. There are external deadline imposers, like, when a new iPhone comes out and stuff like that. But for the most part, like the boss goes away. And so you have to really get to know yourself and get to know, like, and, like basically what your bosses always did when you had jobs, which is like figure out how you work, figure out what you're motivated by, what you're not motivated by, and figure out how to manage your motivation levels and how to get good work out of you. Your bosses, our bosses throughout our jobs always had to figure that about us. Now that is gone, and we have to figure that out about ourselves. And we have to start learning how we fail, what motivates us, what doesn't, and how to get good work out of ourselves. And because there's no one else to do it, then when you're on your own, the way we are, like you have to be the person to motivate yourself in some way. And manage the way you work and find a way to get good output out of yourself despite your flaws.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's the importance of not beating yourself up about it as you learn and discover and are able to sort of better manage yourself. Because I know that is something that I have struggled with a lot, is that I feel like my biggest imposter syndrome moments come at these times when I am struggling with motivation, and I feel like it's like, wow, I did not get anything done this week. Like, who am I kidding? I'm not. There's no way I'm going to be a successful developer. There's no way I'm going to be able to make a living of this. And like, this is the things that I tell myself, like now, 8 years on into this process. And I think it's the importance of like, don't beat yourself up about it. Like, this is just the process. Just try and be patient with yourself and understand that this is a process you have to actively manage, that doesn't happen on its own. It's not like this magic thing and there are people who just like are always productive. It's like the people who are probably the most productive are just the people who understand what makes them unproductive the most and have strategies around minimizing those things over time. And like, that's what makes them that's what makes them productive, is by just being aware of themselves and managing themselves accordingly.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.